Welcome to the Valley of Outlaws podcast, a podcast for those taking the road less trodden, and a podcast for those seeking more. Today I'm joined by Tobias Matthew, a men's coach and guide, helping individuals explore who they are and helping them realise the potential of who they could be. In this episode, we explore the role of masculinity and discuss why it is so important for men to understand their value. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode. Tobias, you are outlaw number 13, which 13 is unlucky. It's unlucky for some, but go on, tell me why you're loving that number.
Straight in there, man. We're going straight into divine feminine energy and spiritual stuff. You know I love this stuff.
Please enlighten us.
Right, so the idea that 13 is an unlucky number is, if we're getting conspiratorial, it's a big thing of the patriarchy. I won't get too woo-woo with it, but 13 is actually the number of lunar cycles there are in a year. And it's actually like it's the number of the divine feminine, right? So it's the number of how many, because of how many lunar cycles there are in a year. It's also the number of like how many cycles a woman goes throughout the year. So it's like this getting more in tune with the natural flow of life and the earth is 13. And yet we've been told it's about 12, right? Because that's what the Gregorian calendar does. It splits it into 12 completely random months. Oh yeah, let's split some into 30, some into 31, one into 28. If we did it aligning with the natural cycles, we would have 13 months of 28 days each. Every day would start on a Monday. Every month would start on a Monday and end on a Sunday, and it would be aligned with the lunar cycle, and we would be much more connected with our natural flow as human beings, right?
Yeah.
But we're not, because that's not what they want. And so it's split into 12 uneven random ones with an extra day shoved in every 4 years, right? So,
Christ.
And then there's this idea that 13 is an unlucky number, but actually Friday the 13th was a day to celebrate feminine, divine feminine, back in the days of like the pre-Roman era. So yeah, it was kind of this number that acknowledged our connection to Mother Earth, the earth, and how like feminine energy and women in particular are connected to a more unseen nature of reality rather than just the rational mind. So
love that.
Yeah.
I mean, we could talk about this for hours because that's so interesting, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. So.
Well, I'm sure we'll get back into it. I'm sure
we will
do.
It all right. We will do. Okay, so as always, I always like to ask my guests, in your own words, who are you, what do you do, and why do you do what you do?
There's a part of me that doesn't want to just answer this. I'm going to be really authentic with who I am and actually what's true for me, right? So when someone asks me, who am I now? I can't answer it simply other than just saying I am.
Okay.
Because I'm in a process of letting go of so much false identity that to answer that with like, I'm Tobias and I'm this, that, and the other, like that doesn't even really feel true. So I'm not really sure what to say to that, but I think the answer, I think what you're really looking for is a bit about me, the character Tobias. So I will share some of that. So, to that extent, I am Tobias. My name is Tobias. I am the soul playing the character Tobias, who is here right now, speaking to you, connected with my heart. It's so interesting because it's like these questions just show, I think, you know, the journey that I'm on right now. And it's like the struggle that I have in answering this and wondering how much do I go into like explaining how kind of out there my journey's getting. I don't know. But I work with men. I'm a coach, a guide, a facilitator, that I haven't really pinned down a label for it yet, but really what it's coming down to is discovering the truth of who we are as human beings, as souls, as energy beings, as what I believe, love in human form. But even if you don't want to get out there and spiritual the way that I am, it's really just about being in your heart and being connected with who you are as a human being. And this is specifically with men now, because I think that the real crisis of mental health is actually less of a mental crisis and more of a spiritual one. And all spirituality really means is just knowing who you are at your source, So, yeah, hopefully that
Beautiful.
gives you an answer.
No, I loved it, and I think that you're right in terms of asking that question. Who are you? It is such a difficult thing to answer because it's who we think we're projecting at the moment, and you can change so quickly. Any day could be so different to the other. So I respect that, and I'm grateful for such honesty with that. Anyway, but I want to really focus on kind of like the men work and understanding that at the moment, and then maybe we'll go back into this who am I kind of thing as well further on, because I think it'd be quite a nice way to go there. So, I mean, why is it so important for you to focus on men? We talk about men's mental health, but what do you see is a problem out there for men which they aren't getting the help they need? And why do you think it's so important to offer that help?
There's a few ways to answer this. I'll answer it directly with what you said there. There's also the kind of personal aspect as to like why I'm doing that, which we can get into, but I'll start with what you asked. We come back to what I said before with this mental health journey is actually really a spiritual one, i.e. knowing who we are and being connected with ourself, with our source, with our hearts. And because of that disconnection, it creates suffering. That's kind of the core truth of spirituality. All life is suffering, and the suffering comes from attachment and separation from who we really are. And that's mostly caused by our mind and our rationale and our intellect and identification with it, right? So this kind of brings us back to why I was struggling to answer, who am I? Men are naturally much more identified with the intellect and the mind and rational thought for various reasons. And it's more difficult generally, and particularly in our society, which is again disconnected from this stuff. It's hard for men to really go inwards and actually like move through the irrational, weird world of the inner feminine or the inner world, which is your emotions, your feelings, your fears, your demons, your traumas. It doesn't come anywhere near as naturally to men as it does women. And there is a very clear kind of stigma of shutting up, keeping it to yourself, powering through, not being a pussy, right, is like one of the things that, I don't know, how open are you to me, like just swearing and saying words like that? Like,
go ahead, we'll just put it on explicit on YouTube, that's fine.
But like there is all of that conditioning, right, which we all know as men, and it generally it comes from fear. This is what patriarchy is. Patriarchy is not, we talk about toxic masculinity. What it really is, it's the immature masculine. It's boys in adult bodies who are living out their fear of the feminine because they don't understand it. And so what we do when we don't understand something and we're not willing to understand it because we're afraid of it is demonize it, suppress it, push it away, which is like why women and femininity has been suppressed for so long. But it's also been suppressed in us as men. And it's led to, and our society, consumer society, has kind of fueled this. We all want love, and I believe love is the core of who we are, right? And that's kind of the root of all mental health crisis is really just like an absence of love and an absence of connection to love. We're taught to seek this externally, through proving ourselves, through getting more resources, through sex, women, pleasure, money, whatever it is. And none of it fills the void, because only you can fill the void by connecting with who you are as a whole being. and like healing and seeing through the illusion that you're fragmented, and yet we all feel it because of our traumas and everything I've spoken about. So this whole kind of mess, if you like, just makes it that most men, I really believe, are lost, like fundamentally lost, don't know who they are, don't know their place in the world, and are battling this inner drive that we actually have to provide, to show up, to serve. While there's also this kind of pushback, toxic masculinity, and a lot of people kind of thinking that all masculinity is bad. So it's like, who am I? Like, genuinely, what's my purpose here? You know, and how do I stop suffering? How do I actually feel okay and like allowed to be as I am as a man? There's just so many unknowns that our culture has never provided us the means to answer. So
yeah. I mean, I was just gonna respond to that and say it would be fascinating just to know how many people even acknowledge what you've just said, because the acknowledgement of it, you know, part of the masculinity said is burying this kind of like way of thinking, and not accepting the kind of that femininity of which we all hold.
The softening and the allowing, right? These words that, you know, we hear soft, we hear like it, and it sounds like weakness, but it's not. It's strength. You know, like the tree that is bending in the wind is going to survive hurricanes, but the one that's rigid and, you know, too strong is not actually strong at all. It breaks, and that's why I'm laughing, but I'm not. It's not really funny. Like, that's why most suicides are men. You know, we're breaking. We're literally breaking in the pressures of the modern world more easily than those who are connected with something deeper than just this rigid, structured world of the rationale and the intellect.
Do you want to go into that part you were talking about yourself? What's masculinity to you, and why it's been so important to you as well, and how you've got there? I think that would be quite interesting.
Yeah, it's been a real journey for me. You know, like a bit of background. So I grew up. I have 3 older sisters and obviously a mum. So a very feminine dominant household. And I think, you know, naturally I'm quite connected with my own feminine energy and my own emotions and things like that. And so I maybe always had more of a sense of actually kind of understanding women or understanding the feminine even before I really knew that's what was happening. And going to school, I part of it was probably the conditioning, the voices of my sisters, you know, all of this like, oh, men are stupid and like all this stuff, but also just kind of seeing, you know, what I guess toxic, immature masculinity looks like in a boarding school of boys competing, and just this like, it put me off it. And I started to build this idea that masculinity is bad, you know, that it's the all competitiveness, even though I still have a lot of this within myself. You know, like a lot of men, was sort of starting to demonize it. And I went down this real world of just more and more connecting with the feminine. And when I started coaching and putting myself out there to help, 95% of the people that came to me were women. And I just started to build the story of, well, maybe this is just who I am, what I'm here to do. I'm here to help women, and that's my thing. And, you know, men aren't doing the work, and all of these kind of stories that I was kind of buying into. And then what happened was, obviously, you and another guy, Magnus, 2 beautiful brothers who were kind of, I worked with some other men, but you were the only real 2 that came and worked with me one-to-one and came into the community in a long-term basis. And I spoke with my coach, Frank, who is a man as well. And he was like, who are your soul clients, your genuine, like 10 out of 10 soul clients? He asked me this earlier this year. And although I've loved everyone I've worked with, I could only say 2 people, and it was the 2 of you. And I was like, and they're both men. Okay. And this just, as soon as I acknowledged that and acknowledged that actually what I was trying to build was probably coming more from my ego and this idea of who I thought I was instead of what was actually true, And when I let it go and created space, just this calling came through and it said, you've got to work with men. And I felt lit up and excited because it was such a stretch out of who I thought I was, and to actually realize that, again, a little bit like I was talking how a lot of men do with feminine energy, I was doing this with my own masculine and actually demonizing the warrior, demonizing that fight energy because of the fear of it in me and the fact that I wasn't as mastered in those things as I was in the world of emotions. So it was like, let's go and conquer this, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that it seemed like your time at school was a time to actually suppress that kind of element, which you have inside you anyway. And maybe, and the thing is as well at boarding school is it's very easy to go down a few different paths of this. You can either be super masculine with it and boisterous and competitive and stuff, or you could very easily be pushed down another direction and very easily kind of like just go along this path, which is you don't even have control of it. It's just one thing after another, one decision after another decision. It leads you down that way. And then you can't really come back because if you try and change character when you're at that school, people then go, who are you pretending to be? You're not that person. And it's impossible.
Yeah.
So I felt that.
That's exactly it. And we've spoken about this and our similarities, right? And I was a very competitive person at school because I didn't fundamentally feel good enough. And I was just like trying to plug that void by being the best at stuff, And so I was trying to be this super mature guy and doing all this sport and music and drama. And then I was head boy and I wasn't happy. And I could tell that, or I certainly at least had a story and a feeling that people didn't really like me. Like obviously I had friends, but I think that I alienated people. And so when I left school and went traveling and then went to university, my pendulum swung and I went the other way. And I completely changed my character and I let go of this trying hard kind of dynamic to just become this people pleasing, go with the flow kind of person, because of the pain of that competitive, ungrounded masculinity that I'd been living in. So it was like, it's this pendulum cycle, and I think what the work I'm doing now is like really the balance, the masculine and the feminine. And this is why I call it the holistic man. It's realizing we have all of it within us and let's stop pushing things away out of fear and realize that, we're whole beings and we can master all of it. That's possible.
How hard do you think it is currently for this truer sense of masculinity to really come through? Do you think there's space for it to really explore and actually, I guess, explode into everyday culture and society? Or do you think it's going to be something gradual where actually more men have to adopt it and then people just have to realize actually men have this ability to have a feminine and a masculine kind of personality, but there's something bigger and greater here because it seems very artificial currently at the moment. You should be I say that there's people, choosing what gender they want to be or whatever as we are now, but it's still very artificial. I'm either this or that. There's no kind of like actual understanding of, I guess, spiritual understanding of it.
Yeah. Well, again, and this is what inspired the holistic man, was just seeing the men's work that did exist is very warrior focused. And that's really important. And I'm, more and more deepening into my own warrior aspects. But it was just like, but we're more than that, like we're the magician, we're the lover, we're the fool. We have all of these archetypes within us. And to be a whole man and human being, we need all of it. And also that there's the feminine part as well. But you were saying like how easy or like how well will that come in? Well, like I think there's an element of, it's all relative, right? On the one hand, it has to happen quickly because that adage, good times create weak men create bad times create strong men. Like the world needs strong men now, and it's time for us to fucking step up, quite honestly. And that's why it has to happen quickly. But that quickly also is a drip by drip thing as well. So
yeah, I think what will be interesting is understanding when that was written, what the definition of a strong man was compared to what it is now.
That's true.
Do you know what I mean? Because the strong man from that point, when I think they refer to it as, grandfathers and great grandfathers who went to war who sacrificed themselves, who didn't necessarily have that connection with their family in the same kind of way. And I think the level you're talking about has a completely different meaning and connection.
Well, I would say it's the evolution of it. The warrior is needed, but the battlefield isn't out there. The battlefield is inside your own heart. That's the fundamental truth, is like, we're not, yes, there's an external enemy and there's evil people trying to control the world. Yeah, sure, that exists. But the truth is that they are just an externalization of the darkness that we all have inside of us. And the longer that we keep projecting our own shit out on the world and blaming an other and then trying to fight that other, it just keeps the whole cycle in a loop, right? And that's what we're trying to break, is by acknowledging humbly, we're all connected, and anything I see out there exists in me. That's true of the good and the so-called bad. And so I need my warrior, but the warrior of today is about going inwards and facing the shit that you don't want to look at and feeling it, healing it, releasing it. That's the battlefield, because as you do that, you create more love in the world, and that's really the answer.
The word which is just blaring in my mind is acknowledgement. It's learning to acknowledge the traumas. And I can say that from a position of actually going through a year of coaching with you, and actually together helping me acknowledge some of the knots I had inside me, you know? And it's like, there's no external cure. As you said, this is an internal cure which has to be done with time, patience, and acknowledgement. You have to shine that light internally on yourself, I guess.
Yeah. And actually, one of my greatest teachers, a guy called Kyle Cease, who again is a man doing a lot of this inner feminine kind of work. He said something last night, which was something along the lines of, I discover my true power by acknowledging my powerlessness. You know? So it's like, it's this opposite of, yes, I'm a strong man and I'm going to build with these muscles, but I'm just compensating for the fact that I fundamentally feel like a weakling inside who's not worthy of love, to, I'm going to dissolve into this really like crippling anxiety, vulnerability, fear, worthlessness that I feel. I'm going to allow myself to cry through that and be seen and witnessed in that, because then it goes. And then I realize, I'm still here, which means this thing I was afraid of isn't me. So what am I? Well, that's your power. That's what this whole conversation is about, right? Of like, who am I? You're that which remains. You're the space that holds all of it. However you want to put it, like, we can't really define it in words, but true power lies in going through the stuff that makes you feel powerless and realizing that actually it's not true. And that's what you've done, by the way. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for that. Not that it's ever done, you're doing it still, but
exactly in the process. Thank you. I know you've kind of covered this a little bit, but how do we get here now? How do we get to this point now where actually it's so critical to start facing this? Like, what do you think are some of the biggest cultural problems we've seen, which are out there, which are really not allowing men to really explore this work which is needed?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, it's that fear of the feminine, the suppression of it, and then this pendulum swing, which has led to the natural backlash, and then the kind of the fear of the masculine, right? And so there's this, the word is depolarization. So, we talk about masculine, feminine. Well, there's this real thing. For instance, I was talking about this on my Instagram the other day, and someone was like, I don't vibe with this. I don't agree with your worldview, because, to be open, in my perspective, they've largely been kind of led down this depolarization narrative of like sex doesn't exist and this polarity doesn't exist. And I'm all for gender identity fluidity, absolutely, that's great. But the fundamental law of this reality is one of polarity, right? Yin and yang. And that creates magnetism. It creates attraction. It's a law of nature, right? And we can call this masculine, feminine, but it's those two kind of dynamics of the same whole that keeps this reality together. And it's very clearly true, and you can see it most clearly between a man and a woman, whether that's in human beings or out in nature, just kind of how that works and how that creates life, but also within ourselves. So this depolarization that's happened, where it's been a kind of pendulum swing from just this like uber unconscious, immature masculine thing. Women have then been allowed to discover kind of some of their masculinity, but then it's almost like at the suppression of their own femininity. And then men have kind of also been allowed to discover some of their femininity, but also, so it's like this, there's a lack of balance. And, I can feel in me there's this part that's like apprehensive talking about this, even because there's such a narrative about, gender norms and all these things, where it's like you're being whatever phobic or whatever. But it's actually, I think that there's a genuine, shall we say, there's been some things that have happened to kind of make this depolarization the case, which takes away that, first of all, connection with who we are as individuals and people, but also how we connect to each other, and what it means to be a man, and what it means to be a woman. Not just I'm a man and I only have masculinity in me, but I'm a man and I have a masculine core, and I also have a feminine part within me as well. It's like polarization is really important for that. And yeah, do you know what I mean when I say polarization? Is that sort of...
I mean, explain, so we can cover for everybody in case people don't.
Yeah. So if we take a relationship, right, what fundamentally creates attraction, sexual attraction and chemistry in a relationship is polarization. And this is true whether you're in a same-sex relationship or a man-woman relationship. If there's not that polarization between a masculine energy and a feminine energy, then there's not attraction. You know this from platonic relationships, right? Like men who get friend zoned tend to be nice guy people pleasers by what we might call more feminine energy women, because they're not creating that attraction. They're not creating that polarity. Because polarity is what creates attraction. Attraction is one of the fundamental laws of our universe, right? So, while it's true that we have both energies within us, and you can have a man who has a more feminine core and a woman with a more masculine core, which is why same-sex relationships work, or you can have a man and woman together where actually the woman is more in her masculine and the man's more in his feminine. That can all be true. It's just about what's true for me, as an individual. And unless you're being true to your core energy, your truth, then you're not going to be connected with yourself, and you're also not going to be polarizing the kind of sexual relationship that you want either, because you're out of balance basically with yourself.
Yeah, and a lack of authenticity with yourself as well, I guess, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, fascinating. What do you think are some of like the biggest misconceptions about these men's groups from the outside? We've talked about, you've already mentioned a few times, some men groups are talking about the warrior man, that kind of element to it. What are people getting wrong about this as well? Because, some groups might be like that. And we live in a time where we've got, a lot of people, we talked about Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, these kind of people who are really very masculine energies, pushing out very strong opinions, not saying they're right or wrong. But, we talk about men's groups and automatically a proportion of listeners might go towards, oh God, they're starting the next Andrew Tate school.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important. And first of all, right and wrong doesn't exist. I'm not interested in right and wrong. I'm interested in truth, right? Like what's actually true. And there's two elements to truth. There's relative truth and there's absolute truth. Relative truth would be a perception, you and I can both be looking at the same thing, but from two different perspectives, and both of our perspectives are true. But ultimately they're not true because they're just a narrow perspective. That's relative truth. And then there's ultimate truth, which is like water is water, right? and I can see water from this angle. I can see a cup of water from this angle and I can describe it, and that's the relative truth. But the ultimate truth is the whole thing. So, might sound controversial, but there's elements of truth within stuff that Andrew Tate does and says. And that's why it resonates with a lot of people. And it's actually, in some ways, doing some good. Now, there's also a lot of bollocks in it, I think, and there's a lot of toxicity in it. But the reason why some of these things resonate is because there's some much needed truths that men and boys have been starved of that they're finding in these places. Some of it being empowerment, a lot of it being connecting with masculine energy. But again, it is very, what I believe to be immature and boyish, rather than this kind of integrated, grounded, what I call holistic man, right? So, I think that's where the misconceptions can be, this kind of like ownership kind of thing that comes in. And whereas for me, I think that the integrated man, the initiated man, the grown man is more one of service. It's less about what can I get from the world, and it's more how can I serve the world, because we understand that that's kind of actually one of the key roles of masculinity, is actually that we're here to create structure that protects, that provides, that cares for the feminine energy. And one way to think of feminine energy is just like the essence, it's the love, it's the feelings, it's the things that gives life its actual juice, right? Without the feminine, there's just stale rigidity. And these groups, these warrior type groups, are helping men connect with their innate primal drives and needs to do that. But again, because of the fact that there is, when it's not grounded in a connection with the feminine, with love, with the heart, then it can become toxic, because what happens is, and this is kind of at the core of everything I teach, if you're not connected with that ability to find and give yourself love inside, we need that. And so we go seeking it outside. And this is where the toxic get energy comes from, and the immature man will seek to manipulate or abuse or, whatever, all of the horrible stuff that happens at the result of masculinity, toxic masculinity, comes from this disconnection. And that's, I think that's the root of the problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, completely. And another question leading on to this is, how important is it for men to be doing this in groups as opposed to individually, or combining the both? Because again, a lot of the mental health problems we talk about with men is they're dealing with their problems on their own. They're not actually connecting, communicating, acknowledging.
Yeah.
How important is that kind of group work, I guess?
Yeah, it's vital. And there's also this other part to it, which is what you might not hear everybody say, is that you are alone on this journey. And what I mean by that is, and some people will say that that's limiting, but it's not. It's actually very liberating when you acknowledge it, that no matter how deeply even your spouse and your partner, they know you, they will never fully know you the way that you know you. Only you can actually do that, right? Only you have that capacity to truly know something. It comes back to this absolute truth. Absolute truth is just the experience of what is, without labels or perceptions or whatever. As soon as you conceptualize truth, you make it relative, because you're taking something that's whole and then you're kind of condensing it into a thought form or a word form. And that automatically, yes, the truth is still there, but it's not the whole thing. So when you're in a group with someone else or in a relationship, there's always going to be room for misconceptions. There's always going to be projections. So I just want to bring that in, that like we're on our own journey, and that's important to accept. But that's what also brings in the groupness, is because we're all together in that aloneness, right? And that's kind of the truth of this oneness thing. And that's why we therefore need to come together. It's not codependency. It's not, I can't deal with my shit and I need you to do it for me. But it's like, wow, I'm going through this stuff, you're going through this stuff, let's support each other through it. And I think one of the most powerful things I found in our group, that you've been a part of, is just this simple thing of being witnessed by other men in our vulnerability, in our powerlessness, in our fears and our doubts, and being accepted in that, and not needing them to fix it or make you feel better or whatever, but just like, yeah, I see you, brother. And I have something similar in my own space as well. That in itself is incredibly, incredibly healing, and actually does so much of the work. And then it's this brotherhood, this connection together, instead of the competitiveness, this idea that we're competing against each other. It's not true. We're all here with the same purpose, and that purpose, I believe, again, is love and making a better world. And when we unite with that, then it really invites us to step into our power instead of fight each other and fight ourselves.
Yeah, amazing. What do you think are some of the traits which women do amazingly in their groups, which men could be more aware of, and men do amazingly in their groups and women can be more aware of?
Wow. It's tricky. I mean, these are can be quite general questions, right? And obviously,
Of course, yeah.
every group is different and unique. I would say, yeah. So I would say it's that it's kind of the essence of what the feminine quality would be, which is this surrender, softening, allowing, letting things actually be and move and alchemize on their own without this need to fix and control everything as men. That's a lot of the work that we've done. And yet there also comes a point where it's like, we can talk about and we can feel our emotions all we want. At some point, we also remember that we're creators, and there's some anxiety here. And instead of me just talking about it and feeling it all the time, I also have the ability and the power to just go, this has nothing to do with me. And I choose something different. And I'm going to use my energy and my choice. The masculine is I will, I can, and I choose. I will be better. I will be different. And I choose that, and we can bring that intention in as well. And I think without that element, we can get lost a little bit in the surrender and the flow, and then start to be taken for a ride by the emotions instead of being in that sort of centered place of, yeah, I am, kind of in charge of how I live my inner reality. So it's that both sides of it, and both are needed.
Beautiful. What do you think a modern positive vision of masculinity looks like generally as a whole, if we're trying to put it out there and give people an idea of what they could work towards?
So I love this model of the holistic man. Again, this is kind of the thing that, everything that I'm building towards. But the other word that comes up is liberated, and sometimes I'm like, do I want to call it the liberated man or the holistic man? Because it's kind of both aspects, so the holistic we've already really spoken about. It's that understanding that you're connected to the whole and you have everything within you. And then the liberation side really comes from realizing that, we are free beings, and that you can bring all of yourself to the table, and you can dance and play and sing and have joy and like express these, inner child creative parts of ourselves that many of us have suppressed. So, I really see it as, I see it as both. I see it as having the capacity to have both. And this is actually something in my journey I've struggled with at times, and I'm learning how it works. Is like, I would move kind of from a period of masculine, like, right, I'm on my grind, I'm hustling, I'm in my warrior mode. I'm like, I'll go. And I'll do that for like a few weeks or months. And then there would be burnout. And then I would just completely let go and I'd surrender. And like, I'm in my comfort zone. And now what I'm realizing is that it's a dance all times. It's now, it's happening in every moment. And it's like this, and it's like right now I'm in my masculine and I'm also in my feminine. And like, how can we have both together? So, I'm very connected with my heart in this moment, and I'm speaking from this loving place. And yet I also feel this masculine power to kind of really boldly express my truth and like put it across, you know, and it's finding that dance and how it uniquely kind of shows up within each individual, because you know, some men might have like, we can, if we want to put this in numbers, might be more 80% masculine, 20% feminine. Some men, I think I'm about 40 feminine, 60 masculine, but it's all kind of crude. So it's finding that balance within yourself, owning it and expressing it, you know, but also knowing that it's a dance in every moment. So I call it grounding in the ultimate, which is, you know, find that what that is for you. But for me, it's love and that feminine essence, and then using that to inspire my masculine into action, to inspire it into how I show up, and yeah, living from that place. So yeah, protect, provide, serve, but not from a I'm not whole and I'm not enough place. Do it from a I'm a whole being, I'm a loving being, and I have so much to give. I'm inspired, which is the opposite of what, coming back to like Andrew Tate and stuff, a lot of that's about motivation. And to me, motivation comes from lack. Motivation comes from I'm not enough. And instead of looking at this not enoughness and realizing it's not true, I'm looking at the world, I'm looking at what other people have, and I'm motivating myself to go and get it as if that's the answer, right? And I think the real masculinity revolution and what the holistic man and everything we're doing and I'm doing here is about is switching that to I'm the source, I'm enough, I'm whole, and let me express that in the world.
Mm. Do you want to give a breakdown of actually the Holistic Man course as well? So people, we've mentioned it a few times on here, so people kind of understand the journey you're guiding people through, because I think that's probably going to be quite important, because just, you know,
it's evolving all the time. You know, so much of it is I don't know. Yeah. And when I first kind of spoke to you guys, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I know life wants it to happen, right? So it's a bit of an experiment. Yeah. But fundamentally, it encapsulates so much of this philosophy and ideals that I'm sharing here, and you know, giving men permission to, like, instead of this convoluted idea of what masculinity is, it's also discovering it for you and yourself. And this is where this idea of like, oh yeah, maybe I am more feminine than other men, but that's okay and that's welcome. And I can also bring in, you know, my idea of masculinity. So it's not this one idea of what a man is, although I've kind of slightly painted some of these pictures. So what I see it is a movement fundamentally that's not just happening here, it's happening everywhere, of the modern man, what I call the new earth leader, right? So the man who's really connected with his heart, connected with the earth, connected with the fact that we're part of all of it, but that you're also an individual that has a unique gift and expression to give, and that we are most alive as men when we're serving. I think that's fundamentally true. You know, we're here to serve. I really believe that, because go on.
Is that true? Sorry, is that true of? Do you think that's true of men and women though, or?
Yeah, I think so, because again, women have that masculine energy inside them as well.
Yeah.
I would say that might be more of the essence of the masculine. But then even, you know, with women, the serving comes in the freedom to just be and express and inspire through their radiance and their beauty. And the same with, you know, our own inner feminine, right? Like a beautiful piece of music serves through being what it is, because it's beautiful and it inspires things, right? But then let's this is an interesting concept. So you think of like military marching music. The music itself, the song, is like that feminine energy. And then it serves through being what it is. And it inspires, when we had like marching music, men to then go to war. And like their way that they would serve is war, even though it's disconnected with what we're talking about. But does that make sense? A little bit?
No, completely.
So yeah, I think service is inherent with all of us. But, you know, so much of it is like giving men permission to really fully bring themselves to the table and realize, hey, those dreams that you have inside your heart, that feeling that you have that you're here for something more, that you're here for something bigger, it's not arrogance, it's not delusion, that's your soul, that's your truth. You are here for something more, but it's not because you're special, different to other people. You're as special as everyone else, but in your own unique way, you know? So it's really giving us permission to fully show up and bring our gifts to the table, discover what they are, you know, because we have to go inwards to really discover that and let go of all the stuff that we're not. And create a brotherhood, a community of people, of men who are committed to this work, because, you know, I believe that more and more men are answering the call to show up and actually take responsibility for the problems of the world and do something about it. And a brotherhood where we can support each other in that, you know, whether that's networking, whether that's events. And then, you know, obviously the work that I would be doing is kind of that entry point to give men, I guess, permission to move from being stuck and lost to actually that deeper sense of, you know, I know who I am and where I am and what I want to do, at least right now.
Yeah. We live in times where so many things are thrown our way. How do people kind of connect to that authenticity, connect to that voice you talked about, that kind of urge, and actually know they're hearing that rather than a dark side of them, which is trying to make them feel better about themselves?
Well, that's a real journey. I won't tell you that I've mastered it. I mean, my lesson at the moment is realizing just how much I've been listening to my ego's voice and deluding myself that it's my soul, you know, because the ego is a very sneaky thing. And this is where spiritual ego comes in, is that we can have this awakening, but then the ego will come back in and attach itself to this new thing. And then we'll think that we're that. So it's kind of having compassion with yourself that you're not going to get it right. The ego is not a bad thing, you know, and that we're going to dance this dance and make mistakes, because that's part of it. And it's part of the fun of this play. But I mean, we can do a really simple exercise, you know, we can just shut your eyes, take some breaths, and just bring your awareness down into your heart space. And you can just put, and I mean the energetic heart, so this central bit of your chest, not necessarily your physical heart. You can place a hand there or two hands. And you know, this might seem weird for some men, right, who've not done this, and that's because we're so conditioned to be up here all the time. We forget we can place our awareness elsewhere in the body, and that these different parts of our body actually communicate to us. You know, we don't just have one brain. We don't just have this brain. We have a heart brain and we have a gut brain. And the heart brain, there's more neurons, and neurons are kind of, you know, they're like pathways which electromagnetic signals and impulses travel through. There's more neurons going from the heart to the brain than from the brain to the heart. So we know, and you can look into this for those that want to kind of look at the science, a great organization called the Heart Math Institute, who are showing a lot of the science of why our heart is actually the center of our knowing. It's the center of our wisdom. It's the center of who we really are. Whereas we've always kind of been led to believe it's our brain, but the brain is really just kind of a computer. The core operating system underneath it is the heart. And the more you can connect with that and realize, oh yeah, you know, and come back to this now, you sort of breathe and what do you feel here? And maybe you can think about something that makes you feel grateful, someone that you love. You'll notice you can start to feel this opening. You know, you can start to feel what it's like to have your heart open. That it's not just this like open your heart to language thing. It's an actual physical thing that you can feel. And as we start to get better at feeling our body and our energy and not just be lost in our thoughts all the time, we start to understand what are these different voices? Where's it coming from? Is it coming from a fear? If it is, you know, where can I locate that in my body? Or there's some tension in my stomach, which feels like anxiety that's telling me this story. You know, that's a lot of the work that we do, right? And it's called somatic work. Soma means body. So it's like working with the body, using your awareness to kind of realize that a lot of what you think is you is just thoughts coming from traumas and patterns and external voices. And as we get better at working with this inner landscape, you will begin to know what's true for you and what's not. And you won't always get it right, but you get better at it the more that you do it.
How long did it take for you to really understand that, I guess, and understand the difference between, I guess, your true self, your soul, to kind of opposed to these egos, shadows, and all that kind of alternative.
I'm still doing it. I have, again, it's
Yeah.
you know, you learn shadows every day, and I think it's about having that humility and that realization. And this is what I realized the other day. It's like, wow, like I've come so far on this journey and I have a lot of knowledge, but also I'm an infant. I'm a baby taking his first steps still, because we all are. You know, really, we're a very primitive species still that has deluded ourselves into thinking we're super advanced. We're not, because we're so disconnected from ourselves and from our place in the cosmos. And we're just now taking those baby steps into remembering it. So having that compassion is really important. But I would also say at a deep, deep, deep level, we all do know, you know, because our deepest part of us knows that we're of the spirit, knows that we're connected to everything. We all have that knowing, which is why it's like often called a remembering, you know, that we kind of remember who we are. We remember these things. And there's that thing that we kind of experience that, yeah, this actually might feel new, but a part of me knew this, you know? So, yeah, I don't know how well that answers your question, but I would say at a deep, you know, it's like the latest delusions I was going through. When I woke up to them, it was like I knew that was there. I knew I was doing it, but we kid ourselves because it's uncomfortable to change a lot of the time. And so we create these delusions and we live out those delusions until life slaps us enough that we have to change a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. No,
and that, yeah, just be compassionate.
Yeah. How much as well, I mean, because this podcast does a lot about trying to inspire people to kind of connect to their passions, follow their heart, invest in themselves. How important is it for people in some way to follow a passion in some part of their life? Obviously, we've got to be realistic. You've got to make money, but how important do you think that is to actually feeling whole, fulfilled, and, you know, at
It's
peace
everything.
with yourself?
It's everything, because it's not, you know, and this is again something that I'm really realizing, and where my growth lies is that it's a moment by moment, everyday thing. That there's so many things that light us up as human beings, you know, and you might have one thing that you're really great at, but that it's not just that one thing. I think this is the key, is connecting with the passion itself, right? This is one problem with a lot of this work is this idea of purpose, for example, or passion here. We get identified with the form, and we think that I have to attach myself to one form. I'm a basketball player. I'm a musician. I'm an artist. And this is what I do. But this again is where this masculine and feminine stuff comes in. When you realize it's not about what you're doing, it's the essence within it. It's the passion itself. It's how you feel when you have an open heart and you're feeling joyful and radiant. That's what you're looking for. And when you start to target that more than the form, you realize that you can find that everywhere. You know, you can actually start to bring this joyful, open-hearted, expressive, childlike wonder at life into everything that you do. And then suddenly your whole life becomes your art. Your whole life becomes your passion. That's a big part of what I want to convey here with the holistic man. Now, to get there, we often need to have that avenue that we have, you know, and so, you know, a lot of mine is music. You know, I grew up loving music and performing, and I DJ. And so kind of coming back to that place is really important. But it's not the only thing, you know, it's just, that can be an avenue, but also don't attach to it, because that can make people think, I have to make this thing that I'm struggling to make happen become my source of income. Well, no. What if you love to dance instead of making it that you have to make a business out of it? Let the passion of your dance inspire something else to come through, you know, feed that into the rest of your life. And again, make this passion the goal instead of the form that it takes. I think that's really key.
Beautiful. I wrote down a quote earlier, which I wanted to throw in this, which was stop living a life of obligation and start living a life of intention.
Yes.
So how can people take the first steps towards finding these kind of like elements of fulfillment? I guess is that question leading on from that quote, because, you know, as you said, having that, understanding that feeling or during when you're doing that passion is the key. It's knowing that that makes you feel good and you just enjoy that rather than what it makes you look like to the outside world. Setting the attention for why you want to do it rather than what it's going to make you be or what it's going to make people think you are supposed to be like.
Yeah. Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah. So how can people take the first steps towards finding kind of like their passions and fulfillments?
Yeah. The first step is acknowledging where you are and actually having the real courage to reflect. You know, like, where are you in life? Are you fulfilled? Are you happy? Because you're probably not, because most of us aren't. Most people aren't, because we're not taught how to be. Instead of running from that truth and distracting and going straight into chasing fulfillment, because that's how people get caught in the trap of, you know, the hustle and grind and chasing. Pause and acknowledge, you know what? I'm actually not that happy. A lot of sometimes I am, and sometimes, you know, like, but generally life's kind of okay. And actually there's a lot of stuff inside that's not very good. And I've actually, if I'm honest with myself, built up a lot of patterns to avoid looking at that stuff. And if I'm really honest, although I kind of enjoy Netflix and eating ice cream, it doesn't light my soul up. Acknowledge that. Don't demonize yourself for it. Don't, you know, shame yourself. Just really be honest, because radical honesty is what's going to help you transform. Acknowledge where you are, and then start to acknowledge what do you really want, and keep going deeper. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you go deep enough, you'll all come to the same truth. What you want is freedom. What you want is liberation. What you want is love, joy, passion, peace. You want to be connected with your soul. It's really what it comes down to. And so when you know that, you get to focus on the end instead of the means. Again, it comes back to the essence instead of the form. Focus on the fact that you want to be free, you want to be abundant, all of these things, and make that the goal instead of, I want to be a millionaire. You don't want to be a millionaire. You want to be free. You want to feel wealthy, right? And then when you realize that you want to be free and feel wealthy, there's actually many ways to do that other than trying to just make this one thing happen. That thing can still happen, but you're not attached to it anymore. So yeah, radical honesty, first step, about where you are and what do you actually want, and go deeper than the surface level. And if you're attaching to a form, then you're not going deep enough.
I love that. I also realized I interrupted you on the quote. You were going to say something. So I'm going to say the quote again. I wanted to see if it brought up anything, which was, so stop living a life of obligation and start living a life of intention. What does that bring up for you?
In many ways, the essence of what we're talking about with this movement and the holistic man, right? So much of it is like this feeling that we're trapped and we're enslaved to a system of obligation. And we have these obligations. Oh, I have to pay the bills and I have to go to work and I have to do all these things because it's expected of me. When in reality, that's not true. That's something that you're choosing, and you've been conditioned to choose it. So you may not realize you're choosing it, but you are choosing it because there's other ways to live your life. It is possible to free yourself from the system. You only need to be willing and courageous enough to choose it and do the work to make it happen. And that's the difference between obligation and intention. Obligation is like, I'm a victim to life. I'm stuck. You know, I have to do all these things. And intention means realizing no matter what, yeah, we have responsibilities. You know, some people, you have a lot of bills to pay, you have mouths to feed, and you're powerful enough to still create the reality you choose within all of that. That is true no matter what your current situation is, no matter how much bills and debts and problems. And, you know, I'll acknowledge my own privilege in this, but just because I'm privileged doesn't mean that what I'm saying is not true, right? You can be from an unprivileged background and you're still every bit as powerful a creator as anyone else, and still actually have the ability to choose a life of intention, which means, what do I want to create? You know, what do I choose instead of what do I feel like I have to do? And it can start with something as simple as, hey, do you know what? I choose to feel a little bit more peaceful within my day. I choose to actually bring a bit more gratitude to what I do have, you know? And one of the things that we focus on a lot within the Holistic Man, the work we do, is something called an inner intention, which is about, for me, recognizing that your reality is happening inside of you. You know, you think that your problem's out there, you think it's in your girlfriend or your wife or whatever who's saying these things, but it's not. It's what's happening inside you as a result of what's happening out there. And so when you go inwards and you acknowledge that, you create an inner intention, which is, how do I want to feel? How do I want to live my life? Right. Which again comes back to this essence over form. I know that I want to be a loving being who feels free and open and passionate and purposeful as much as I can. I'm not going to do that all the time. It's not always going to happen that way, but that's my ultimate inner intention. So what's the situation that's in front of me? Instead of me trying to control that circumstance, which is where we get stuck in obligation, I'm going to come back to, how can I just be even just 2% more open here? How can I even be just 2% more loving, right? And then I'm in the driver's seat of my life. No matter what's happening in circumstances, you can't control them, but you can control the inner world. Or
I
at
knew
least
there was something.
influence it.
I knew there was something important which I blocked coming out because that was beautiful. How important is it for people to realize that everybody's on their own journey in time? Because some people get to the point where they go, "Oh, I'm too old to change now. I've done this. I've done that. I am the way I am." You know, everybody's on their own journey. Talk about it. Tell me.
Yeah, well, science has shown that that's not true. Neuroplasticity, right? The ability for your brain to rewire itself is never lost. People say that because they're afraid. And there's a line in The Matrix, and The Matrix is one of the best documentaries ever made. I always say that. It's one of the most entertaining ones. You know, past a certain age, we don't usually free people because their mind is so identified with the illusion. And that's true. Cognitive dissonance is what psychology calls it. You know, your egoic your psyche, your personality, which is not who you are, but it's what you're identified with, is built around survival, and it uses its beliefs as a means to kind of make sense of this very chaotic world that we're a part of, so it feels safe. So people become very identified with their beliefs, that to challenge them is to threaten the whole illusory world that you've built inside, right? Which is very threatening to your ego and your mind. It's like death. And so some people are so afraid of what that, because it is a death, you know, this is why they call it dying to be reborn. And spirituality is a death process. It's a death of the false you, so the real you comes through. You know, some people aren't ready for that. And actually some people are so deep in the illusion that it might even be dangerous to do that. And so and this is what you have to realize, like, let people choose that. Oh, cool. You want to choose to live in suffering and that you're a powerless victim? I respect your right to choose that. I'm going to be over here choosing freedom and loving you still from this place. But like, you're choosing it. And even if you want to delude yourself into the fact you're not, that's fine. But it's also like anyone watching who feels bound by their circumstances, you know, it's really important to acknowledge it. It's never too late to change. And just whatever's telling you that it is, underneath that is a fear, and fear is genuinely false evidence appearing real. That's a true adage. It's true because, you know, fear is built on the material world. And we know this again from physics and science, that the world that we see, we can only see, hear, smell, taste, and touch like a couple of percentages of what's actually here in terms of energy and different, you know, frequencies and all this kind of stuff. So realism is not reality at all. It's looking at a very small portion of it and deciding that that's real. And so, you know, that's kind of what you're doing basically, is deciding that this tiny little portion of reality that's been my life is all there ever is. And instead of expanding my horizons, I'm just going to stay stuck within it. acknowledge that you're doing that, because
Nice.
that's the
I
key.
was gonna go on and ask you about coaching stuff like that, but I actually think I want to wait till when you're in England and do a whole session about actually your journey to coaching and do that, and maybe we come just to a few more closing questions, maybe about for people who may be interested in joining the Holistic Man, or maybe people who aren't. What are some of the kind of initial kind of steps they can make in terms of moving forward? Let's say if they want to join this, what they could, how can they reach out to you, and what can they do to start this?
Yeah, well, before like coming and reaching out to me, I would say if you've watched this whole thing, something has stirred in you, right? So first of all, connect with what that was. What was it that I said or you said that stirred something in you, and what stirred in you, and connect with that, because that's what matters. It's not it's not about the form. It's not about you coming and joining the Holistic Man. It's about you honoring your commitment to yourself. So if your heart started to stir and open, then make the choice to honor that and commit to that. And then, you can start to find your path, because not everybody's right for what I'm building here and what we're building. And yet the truth within this applies to everybody. So honor that first of all, and then decide what and feel into, and I say feel instead of think, because that's the key. What does your heart say? What the path is from there. If you do feel like, oh wow, this is really exciting, I want to know more, obviously you can check out my Instagram, speak to you maybe, for an example. There's many things that I want to do. I want to start kind of putting together like free men's circle and things that people can come and check out. But what I'm offering at the moment is what I call a liberation session that's free for any man who's willing to do this work, who feels that call. So just come and speak with me, and actually, with me as a mirror, start breaking through those illusions that you're going through, that you've created for yourself, to see how free you actually are, and what the liberated holistic you could look like. I'm offering that to everyone, any man at the moment, who resonates with this. And the intention with that is really help you discover more of yourself, and then decide what you want to do with it from there. And if people are right, I'm going to be starting the next cohort of the Holistic Man in January. It's going to be 6 brothers plus me, really going deep. If people are right for that and they're ready, then we can talk about that. But it's nowhere near as important as actually the journey itself, which is the journey to getting back to your heart and honoring what calls you.
And for people who maybe don't have the, let's say, I don't want to say courage, but who aren't necessarily feeling that call yet, what maybe are some things they can do with themselves just to start being more aware? And I think the line I'm going down this is kind of things like meditation, no screen time, little things which we've done together, which have allowed me to realize the importance of space. Initially, but there might be some other things which you say, no, these are more important.
It's also relative. I would say just start with taking stock, and if you can get a pen and paper and just have the courage to sit down and just write everything out in your life that's causing you grief, and what it brings up inside of you, and just see it to begin with, then when you see it, you're going to be able to get clearer on what to do about it. There's no point starting a meditation practice or journaling or whatever when you're not really clear on why you're doing it and what your goal is. And I think too many people get caught up in the what and the how. Well, the how and the practices. And that's why they don't stick to meditation, and that's why they don't whatever, because they're disconnected from the most important thing, which is the why. You need to find your why. And you find your why by actually starting with the pain that's showing up in your life and looking at that and realizing, do you know what? This is kind of shit, and I don't want to suffer anymore. And actually go into that and then realize, yeah, actually, I want to be free. And this ignites me to think of being free and to think of being abundant and all these things. Well, now you're connected with your why, and you can move from that place. And when you have a big enough why, the how and the what to do will come from there. So I'm not going to give any tips and tools, because
absolutely fine, perfect. You answered it beautifully. I think we're going to wrap up there, because I think that, when you're back in the UK and we talk again, we can really delve in deep to your journey and understanding it, but also understanding like the smaller self and those kind of characters, which is quite interesting. But I think today, covering what we have done,
we've come deep in an hour, haven't we?
Yeah, I know. There's so much we've gone through that I just don't want to dilute the quality of what you've been saying. So I'm going to thank you. I'm going to thank you for joining the Valley of Outlaws. You are Outlaw number 13.
Love it. Lucky
Tobias,
number 13.
You're in America at the moment as well. Do you want to just quickly say what you're doing over there, and then we will wrap up? And
well, I came over for a couple of retreats from that teacher I mentioned, Kyle Cease. One was in Sedona, which is a very highly charged spiritual place. One in Salt Lake City, which is similar for different reasons. And then I just kind of staying here, really. I'm kind of digital nomading at the moment. I was in Bali earlier this year, so now I'm here in America, and I'm living my life and discovering who I am and more of who I am, and trying to serve as best I can. Really, that's all I can say. So I'm here until December 10th, and back to the UK, and we'll see what happens from there.
Beautiful. Well, Tobias, thank you so much, and I'm
Thank you,
looking
brother.
forward to getting you back on again.
Hell yeah, man. I'm so excited. And thank you for doing this as well. I want to honor you, because I remember when we had the conversation about you starting this, and it's building, you're creating, and that's it's so important. So
Yeah. And thank you so much. I appreciate it. Cheers, man. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Valley of Outlaws podcast. If you did enjoy it, please share, like and subscribe, and please tell all your friends about it. We're very excited for where this is going to go. We've got people to speak to and stories to tell. Thank you.